Whether it is a financial decision making, an important decision about a job, or a daily decision making about an ice cream, we are repeating same mistakes again and again. And we are prone to choose bad choices. Why? Why are we falling always in the same traps? Why don't we learn from our mistakes and make the right and successful decisions? Do these questions sound familiar to you? Are you tired to be in the endless loop of failing to make the right decisions? Then you are in the correct place to change this bad habit once forever. Hello fellow shrewd investors, welcome to another video in your channel. This is the first of a series of videos on our decision-making behavior. To understand this behavior, we must first understand what is going on in our brains. Experiments have shown that there are preconsciously initiated decisions. This can lead to the argument that there is no free will. But it is not that simple, as new research shows. John Dylan Haynes, a British-German neuroscientist, is a professor at the Bernstein Center for Computational Neuroscience at Charité Berlin and director of the Berlin Center for Advanced Neuroimaging. Haynes has conducted some very interesting experiments on decision-making in the brain using the latest neuroscientific methods available. This scientist and his colleagues showed that the decisions are made in the brain 7 seconds beforehand. Or in another word, 7 seconds is the time that you have that you can intervene to change the decision of your brain. Here is a simple explanation of the experiment done by the group of John Dylan Haynes. People who volunteered to participate in this experiment led in an MRI tunnel so that their brain activity could be recorded during the experiment. They could choose again and again in neurons whether they wanted to press a left or a right button, and then they had to press them. The participants were also shown a series of randomly chosen letters, each lasting half a second on the screen. They were asked which letter was on the screen when they made their decision, as this would give the researchers the clue about when the decisions were actually made. This way, the scientists had the decision, the time of making the decision, and the brain activity before, during, and after making the decision. With this powerful experimental strategy, they showed that the decisions were usually made half a second to a second before the actual movement to execute that decision. But what was very interesting was that they found brain activity that indicated very early on how someone was about to decide, up to 7 seconds. In other words, the brain has information about a decision that someone only will realize 7 seconds later that they are going to make. They made several different control tests and their results were quite robust and solid. How is it possible that we can react so quickly when brain activity has a 7-second lead time? This experiment can be applied now on many other daily important decisions we do all the time. For instance, where am I going to study? What kind of a job will I do? In what kind of assets do I invest? In these scenarios, you don't have to react quickly, but have time to build up the decisions at your own pace. However, even in those situations, when we are confronted with such decisions, we are leaning towards a specific choice direction right at the onset. This is because the brain seems to have already prepared the decision before we feel like we are deciding. Having long time to build up the evidence and the decision direction is what allows us to deliberate enough and intervene in a conscious manner in our decision-making process. But we don't always have this long enough time to decide even for some very important decisions. It is there that this 7 seconds rule has to be taken much more serious. In a side note, I have to say that having long enough time is not always helpful, and there is caveat of deliberating too long and keeping the decision till the last moment. But this will be discussed separately in later episodes of this series. This spectacular result of the experiments by John Dylan Haynes and his collaborators is puzzling. 7 seconds before consciously deciding on an action, the brain has already decided on the action. The dramatic temporal lack of consciousness seems too counterintuitive and controversial. Consequently, not only the neuroscientists but also the philosophers are called upon to provide interpretations. Is the soul or a higher power or whatever it is the real master of our brain after all? On the other hand, going back to the experiment, if the test person manages not to press the button, is this the free decision making, and if so, who has the final decision making power? Is there a competition between the conscious self and that unknown, unconscious upper power? In a further experiment to test the hypothesis of the 7 seconds intervention time for the decision making, they ran an algorithm to predict the decision making of the tested subjects. The result was that the algorithm won in many cases, but in some cases not. What was here different? After further analysis, the scientists found out that after the brain has made the preparatory activity, the subjects can still stop the movement. In other words, they can still abort the decision. This contradicts the interpretation of the previous experiment's results, according to which this process is like a domino chain where you can no longer intervene. Instead, it looks more like we can stop this process. So we still have control over it until a very late stage. Does this mean that we still have a free will? Yes, somehow. If we imagine the decision making in the brain running like dominoes, then we can think of a given scenario. Decision making in the brain can be well pictured with a row of dominoes. When the first domino is bumped, all the other dominoes fall over in turn, unless you manage to remove one of the dominoes from the chain. Then the following stones remain standing. According to the experiments of John Dylan Haynes, actions proceed in a similar way. They are planned, prepared, and triggered in unconscious areas of the brain like the chain of dominoes. The conscious intervention plays the role of the one who removes a stone from the chain and stops it this way. The consciousness can prevent an action. But this consciousness has only 7 seconds time to intervene in an action. Can we say that solely the consciousness enables the free will of the human being? Well, it seems to be, at least partly, the answer. The free will of deciding on the execution of an action of the human being depends on the premise of intervention of consciousness. Is this supposed to be free decision making? Yes, it is a free will to some degree, but there are constraints and time limitations. According to John Dylan Haynes, if by free will you mean that the decision can be made independent from the brain processes, then that is of course impossible according to scientific studies. What makes the story more remarkable and thought-provoking is that even the decision to abort an intention that has been made has its own mechanisms in the brain. So we can understand not only how the decision originally comes about in the brain, but we can also see the mechanisms of how that person stops the decision again. Consciousness is our must-have tool that needs to be utilized at its highest potential to audit preconsciously initiated decisions. then yes, consciousness is the green light for a certain free will. In my next video, I will explain what consciousness is and how to use it to take better and more conscious decisions in your life and hopefully reach your goals one by one. I hope you enjoyed and benefited from this video. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Stay free and happy until next time.